by now, everyone has heard the veiled threat that Democratic Congressman from California, I always want to call him Small Ball or Swalwell, Swalwell, I'll get it at some point, made against honest law-abiding gun owners of the United States. Let me give you a little bit of the backstory on this. Eric wrote an op-ed for NBC News, and it was essentially laying out what his plan would be to ban semi-automatic firearms and confiscate them and imprison people who didn't follow his ban or confiscation. Now, I won't go into the details of what all he said because you can read it. It's everywhere. And again, it's an op-ed for NBC News. You can easily find it. But he essentially stated that the U.S. government should offer semi-automatic firearm owners, which he calls them assault weapons, but if you look at the terms of what he actually includes in the definition of a assault weapon by him, it's semi-automatic guns. So, and look, let's make no mistake. I'm not going to give him credit for this. When any Democrat says assault weapons, they are essentially talking about semi-automatic guns, period. Whether they look like this, or a handgun of some sort. Because if you look at the definition of the bills that they have already floated about assault weapons, it includes anything that is semi-automatic and box-fed. Shotguns, pistols, rifles. So don't fall into the trap of thinking it's the scary-looking guns like this guy right here. It's all box-fed semi-automatic firearms out there. So I'm not going to use their term of assault weapons. I'm going to use semi-automatic guns because that's what they're essentially trying to ban. But he's saying that we need to ban them all, make all of them illegal. And he's saying that if you just ban them now, like the old assault weapons ban that Bill Clinton enacted, that you would still have millions on the street, which essentially there may be 15 million at last count. Who knows? Because they're not, quote, registered. But my estimations based on numbers I've seen are 15 million. So what he's saying is, hey, there'd still be 15 million on the street. We need those back also. So not only do we need a ban, but we also need to confiscate and imprison people who don't follow law. And his plan actually spells that out. He's saying that we ought to give everyone $1,000 for every semi-automatic gun that they have. And for those that do not turn them in voluntarily, they should be essentially made into felons. They should be put in prison for it. Now, the irony is not lost on me that Small Ball or Swalwell is the same kind of guy that runs on prison reform to release people out there who have been found guilty of burglaries, assaults, drug charges, all things of that nature. He's willing to release those people on the street, but he wants to imprison you and me, who up to this point have been perfectly good and honest law-abiding citizens. So he's going to make room by letting people out on the street who have been convicted to make room for the people who have never been convicted, but oh, by the way, we have a semi-automatic gun that we did not elect to turn in order to violate our own constitutional rights, so to speak. So very interesting that he wrote that article. And it is an interesting article because if nothing else, it gives you a snapshot inside the mind of what these gun grabbers truly think. Now, people like Dianne Feinstein, she is smarter than Swalwell. They're in the same backyard. So Swalwell is trying to impress Feinstein with his linguistic charm by trying to say these things that he knows she's thinking. But he's not as smart as her. See, she's been in there a long time. She's figured it out long ago that in order to get some of the more stupid people who would buy into a confiscation or a ban, you just use sugar-coated wording, but don't say what's actually on your mind. Say the scary stuff like assault weapons and say things like that and talk about kids getting killed, fudge the numbers if you can, but never say what you really want. Now, you can put that in the bill because the average American is too stupid to read these bills and can't usually tell what's in them anyway when they do try to read them. And I'm trying to be nice here because a lot of people out there just simply won't take the time to read them. Feinstein knows that. Swalwell is too stupid to figure that out. Now, after Swalwell wrote this article and put it in NBC News, a man by the name of John Cordillo tweeted his op-ed. I'm not sure who John is, but he's got a blue check mark next to his name on Twitter, so he must be somebody. He retweeted Swalwell's NBC News op-ed and made the comment, "Make no mistake, Democrats want to eradicate the Second Amendment, ban and seize all guns, and have all power rest with the state. These people are dangerously obsessed with power." Now, a guy who I follow, which you ought to, Joe Biggs on Twitter, took this tweet and forwarded it on. And he stated in his tweet, so basically Representative Swalwell wants a war because that's what you would get. You're out of your effing mind if you think I'll give up my rights and give the government all the power. Now that was just a forwarding of the other text that was simply the op-ed of Swalwell. You got to understand, guys like Swalwell who want to be accepted so bad, who are failing miserably. Remember, this guy wants to be president. He's thrown his name into the 30-something people who want to be president, run for president in 2020. So this guy wants to be somebody. He's like the West Coast version of Cory Booker. So this guy he's hungry for any attention. So if you tag this guy in a tweet, he's probably going to read it. Well, he read this one. His response was, and it would be a short war, my friend. The government has nukes, too many of them, but they're legit. I'm sure if we talked, we could find common ground to protect our families and our communities. So he's wanting to pad it at the end there because you know he put the brakes on when he realized what he was writing, but he wanted to say it so badly that he couldn't take it out. Kind of like Trump. Sometimes Trump says things that he shouldn't say. Swalwell should not have said this. And Swalwell knew he shouldn't have said this because as he was writing it, to add that last sentence saying that, oh, we ought to be able to come to some common ground, he's making the veiled threat, but trying to soften it up as he finishes his tweet so that people don't get too mad at him because he knew it was not right to make that kind of a threat. Joe Biggs responded to him and said, so our government would nuke its own country in order to take guns? Wow. Joe Walsh responded, if you don't turn over your guns, we'll nuke you is definitely a reasonable argument to make. Obviously, he's using a little of Swalwell's own sarcasm here, to which Representative Eric Swalwell responded, Joe, it's sarcasm. He said he's going to war with America if gun legislation was passed. I told him his government has nukes. God forbid we use sarcasm. So he's trying to walk it back. He's trying to walk it back. I'm sure the second he hit the tweet button, he knew, man, I probably shouldn't have done that. So now he's trying to walk all this stuff back. Of course, Swalwell even responded to Joe Biggs by saying, don't be so dramatic. No one is nuking anyone or threatening that. I'm telling you, this is not the 18th century. The argument that you would go to war with your government if an assault weapons ban was in place is ludicrous and inflames the gun debate, which is what you want. I'm giving Swalwell the benefit of the doubt, knowing that, yes, he was using sarcasm. But his sarcasm was his way. By using sarcasm, he can say what he means without actually saying it word for word. What he really meant was the U.S. government has the power to crush its U.S. citizens if it wants to. We have the means to do it. Now, he's using the ridiculous nature of using nuclear bombs against U.S. citizens. Look, guys, we know that would never happen. Honestly, what are you going to do? Kill off a third of the country by dropping one bomb to try to get at, what are you going to corral all the gun owners into one little section of the country? No, we know that was a stretch. We know that Swalwell did not mean that they were going to use actual nuclear weapons. But again, what he is stating in so many words and through his veiled threat is that this government would crush you law-abiding people. Look, guys, it's never going to get to this. It's never going to be the people against the state, so to speak. That's not going to happen. We're never going to have a, quote, civil war. It's never going to get to that point. People like Swalwell will never get into any real power where they can do any real harm like that. He's not anyone that anybody really takes serious, but people vote for him, so you got to listen to him. Eric Swalwell, you as a person, you specifically are the reason that the Second Amendment was written. It was written for people like you. It was written for people like you who have no regard for the Constitution, no regard for unalienable rights that we all have, and you have as well. It was written for people like you who would seek to take things from us and violate other portions of the Constitution by taking those things from us. That's at least two other constitutional amendments that you would be violating other than the second, by taking those things from us, confiscating them, making us felons for things that we purchased in the past that were perfectly legal to purchase whenever we purchased them. There were no laws outlawing those things to be bought at that time. And you want to make jokes? You want to say that, oh, I was just using that in sarcasm. Look, let me explain something to you. You of all people should know, which clearly you don't, but as a U.S. congressman, you should know that the law and the people's rights are not something that we joke about. What do you think people would say if you were making jokes about nuking people if you tried to violate their First Amendment rights? They would be just as upset as they are about this. You cannot pick and choose what rights you think are easy and fun to make fun of. This is not one any more than the First Amendment or any of the other amendments are of God-given unalienable rights that we all possess. And again, that you possess as well. Eric Swalwell, if you ever feel the need to push a bill like this through that's this unconstitutional, that would strip me of my rights to protect my family, and if you ever put my family in harm like this, by trying to take away my Second Amendment rights and my right to defend myself and my family, if you ever push a bill like this through, and if you ever actually get a bill like this passed, and if you ever get to a point where it has to be enforced, I challenge you and I welcome you and I invite you to be the one, be a man for a change. Be the man that comes to my house to take my guns from me.